Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here then hi, my name is Miss Paris and I'm a newly qualified primary school teacher here in the UK. A lot of you have started your placements, if not you are starting them early October, so very soon. How exciting. For those of you who have already started, you might already be leading some group sessions, you might be leading half of a lesson, or you might be at that stage and everybody is different, everybody's journey is different, so don't compare, it's fine if you haven't, but you might soon be teaching your very first lesson. So in this video I wanted to keep it nice and short, although I do tend to waffle, so might be a long video anyway, but I just wanted to give you 4 tips to help you when teaching your very first full lesson. So if this is something that applies to you, that will be useful for you, make sure you stick around to the end because all of these are equally as important. They're in no particular order and it will just help you a lot in the long run if you can try and nail this in your first lesson. My first tip is about preparing all your resources beforehand. I know with secondary, as long as you have your teaching stuff ready, it might not be as important or as time consuming because there's more writing involved. However, you still might need to print sources out if you're doing things like history or English or all those kind of bits and bobs. For primary, you probably will end up spending longer than you would have thought preparing resources. In Key Stage 1 and sometimes Key Stage 2 you have to cut things to make sure they fit in books. You need to print out learning objectives or learning intentions for every single lesson. I know some schools do maybe 1 or 2 or 3 per lesson depending on the content. You might need differentiated worksheets, you might need concrete resources to prepare. If you have everything prepared, this saves you so much stress and so much time beforehand. If your lesson is in the afternoon, then you probably could do some of this preparation stuff during lunch break because by the time it's afternoon, the class ends up being a bit of a mess anyway. But if you are teaching first thing in the morning, you need to make sure that you have everything printed, everything ready to go. When I started getting organised, because not gonna lie, at first I wasn't this prepared. Once I started getting organised, I would have, let's say if it wasn't mixed ability and I had differentiated worksheets, I would make sure I had each one in separate piles. If it was something that was kind of class-led and they could pick which worksheet they were going for, I would make sure to have some spares. All of these things save you that rush in the morning or wasting your whole lunch break. It's really important to try and get organised. Alongside getting organised and having resources ready, just as a personal tip, you don't have to, you might have a great memory, but I would have a lesson plan printed out for you, as well as maybe your mentor or your TA, if you have one, and then this allows you to make sure that you are on plan, you don't forget what you wanted to do. If there was something you wanted to say specifically, then you can remember what you wanted to say specifically. I think that really helps. It also leads on nicely to tip number 2, which is about the timings of your lesson. Even in my later lessons during the year, I would have comments about the pace of my lesson. So either I might be waiting too long for them to write something and some of them were going off task, or I would go too quickly, or I would have too much planned and I didn't manage to go onto my plenary, or I didn't manage to end it, or I would leave them working too long because they were too into it and suddenly the transition would be a mad rush at the end, like, okay, everyone put your pens away, books away, you know, wash your hands, ready for lunch. And that's really not what you want. I suppose with secondary this is true as well. Please let me know below if I'm wrong. Because the children also need time to pack away their stuff and move on to the next lesson. I know that now with COVID people might not be moving around, but also for you as a teacher, if you are the one moving around, so for example me in PPA, I move around, if you are a secondary school teacher moving around per class, you need the time to make sure that you can pack all your stuff away, disconnect your computer or log off or whatever it is, and be ready for your next class in time. To help you with the timing, again, printing out that lesson plan would help you, but also maybe just on a post-it note having the key timings. If you know the specific times of your lessons, you could say 10 to 10:15 do this, or just say the first 15 minutes do this, next 20 minutes do this, whatever it is. But that really helped me, especially when I was in Key Stage 1 doing the shorter lessons. You couldn't suddenly get too carried away because if it's a 20-minute lesson and you talk for 10 minutes, then either the children are going to lose their attention, and if they don't, which is miraculous, then they're still not going to have enough time to actually do some hands-on work themselves. So print out that lesson plan, write it on a post-it note, or you can just be really aware of the classroom around you. If you see lots of children not writing, and you see lots of children chatting or daydreaming, maybe the pace of the lesson isn't quick enough. Especially with primary, you need to be snappy, 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 because there's only a certain amount of extension tasks or challenges that you can give them. So make sure it's quick, make sure you stick to your timing. My third tip is to talk to your TA or your mentor beforehand. I know some of you might not have TAs during your placements, but if you do have your mentor and it's not an observation, you could kind of utilise them as a TA. I know that my mentor and I, we kind of had this deal. We had some children that needed that additional support for behaviour wise as well as academic wise, and so when we weren't teaching, we would kind of swap around and be like, okay, could you work with this child one-to-one, make sure that they are focused, make sure that they are working. And then with the TA as well, we would say, okay, could you work with these children, or could you have a look around the classroom while we focus on this one cut-off group. TAs don't always have to be sat with the pre-working towards. I think there's this misconception. Actually, they could work with the greater depth children if you wanted them to, and you work with the children that need that extra support. It's really dependent on what you are doing. You might just want them to walk around and help you mark. That's absolutely fine as well. But make sure you tell them what your goal is for the lesson beforehand and what you expect them to do. I had it a few times where I would take all the workload on myself, not really tell her anything, and as well as the children coming up to me being like, what do I do next? She was also doing that. And that's not fair on her, because, you know, her job isn't to ask what should I be doing. It's kind of to make sure that she's a useful resource for the classroom and for the children. So just tell them beforehand. Either if you arrange a few minutes before school or before your lesson or during a break, just to keep them up to date with everything, then that would help you out so much. It reduces your workload and the stress, and that's what they're there for. They're there to help you. Number 4, and this is another one that might be tricky because of this whole COVID thing. I know a lot of schools are now in rows. However, if you can, try and seat children strategically. So what I mean by this is, if you know there are 2 children that constantly mess about when they are next to each other, and if you're trying to run a lesson, the last thing you really want to be dealing with when you're trying to think about pacing and trying to think about teaching is those behavioural issues that you could have easily sorted before the lesson even started. So just make sure that they are not sitting together. Make sure there's somebody between them, or that they are opposite rows or whatnot, whatever it is. Try and sort that out for behavioural issues. Another thing you can do strategically with seating plans is, if you want, let's say, 3 children to work with a TA, make sure they are at the end of the row so the TA isn't constantly going back and forth around the classroom to try and work with them. If you have a cut-off group, make sure that that is organised beforehand. If they are on a specific table, do you have enough chairs? Do you have enough spaces for all of them? Make sure that they know about it in advance too. When I started getting, and don't worry, you won't be doing this for your first lesson, hopefully, but when I started getting really into depth with my maths lessons, and I would have about 5 different groups going on, I would realise that the shape of our tables didn't fit the amount of children that I wanted in that group. So I would often find myself in break time rearranging the tables, rearranging the chairs, and obviously because the children didn't know what was going on, I had to put all the books out as well. And so again, this takes time. It's about getting your resources ready. For your first lesson, it won't be anything this complicated, don't worry. I guess this is just a tip for future lessons. But yes, try and seat children strategically according to what their needs are, maybe who they're working with. If you know loads of children are going to be working independently, try and make a whole row available just for those that might need extra support, so that they're all in the same row. You could just go from one child to the next, and maybe the TA could walk around with those working independently, see how they're doing, check if they're meeting the LI, things like that. My 5th and final tip, and okay, actually this was probably the most important one in my opinion, is to set your expectations and reinforce. At the time, I knew what reinforce meant, but I still wasn't reinforcing. Reinforcing is directly reminding them of this. You know, if you say at the beginning of the lesson, okay, yesterday we had a lot of swinging on chairs, let's not swing on chairs, da 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 da, and then somebody swings on chairs, just saying no, or, you know, doing this action, this is my favourite action, you know, with the eye gaze, you know, they'll do that, but you didn't remind them. You would have to say something like, okay, X, I asked everyone at the beginning of the lesson to not swing on their chairs. you know, either this is a warning or I'm not going to ask you again, put it down. And if next time they do it, then you react in accordance with the behaviour policy. It's really important for the children to know that you expect the same as all the other teachers. Presentation should be the same as with you than with your mentor or their class teacher. You know, behaviour should be the same. You have kind hands with this person, so you need to have kind hands when I'm teaching. It's exactly the same thing. Some schools don't even let the children know that you are a trainee teacher, because then automatically they see you slightly differently, or they might try and push your buttons a bit more. Make sure to be really strict with them and keep reinforcing it. It doesn't just make the class, the lesson go smoother, but it also makes your job easier, because rather than stopping every 2 seconds, saying, okay, stop this, stop that, stop this, you know, you say it maybe a few times and then afterwards you really knuckle down, because they cannot think that you are a billion chances lady. You need to go through with that warning when it's needed. You need to go through and maybe take them up the behaviour chart or down the behaviour chart, whatever your school policy is. You need to be treated exactly the same as the other teachers, and for them to know that, you need to tell them that. So if you enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up. I think these tips are really, really important, and hopefully they will help you. If you have any other tips that you can think of, please leave them down below. If you have just taught your first ever lesson, let me know how it went. What did you learn from it? What did you find tricky? What did you enjoy? Let me know, because I don't know, I enjoy hearing about your teaching journeys. And if you would like to stick around for more teacher content, make sure you subscribe and then hit the bell button so you can be notified when I post. I will see you soon, and good luck with that first ever lesson if that is you very soon. See you next time. Bye!